So I think it's good we start with Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Maliki yawmiddin, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een, Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim, ghayri al-maghdubi alayhim wa lad-dallin, sadaqallahu al-aliyyul azim. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعن الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين آمين يا رب العالمين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So we begin tonight with two verses from Surah Al-Imran, the chapter of the family of Imran. We should reflect on them carefully. We heard them in the passages of Quran that we had at the start of the program, because everything we will discuss this evening is contained within them. And these are from, of course, Surah Al-Imran, the third chapter of the Quran, the chapter of the family of Imran, verses 169 to 170. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, "Do not think of those killed in the way of God as dead. Rather, they are alive with their Lord, receiving provision, rejoicing in what God has granted them of His bounty, and receiving glad tidings about those who have not yet joined them from behind, that there shall be no fear upon them, nor shall they grieve." These verses tell us two important things. And I want us to hold both of them tonight, not just the first, which we're quite accustomed to hearing, but the second, which we too often let pass. The first thing is this: the shaheed or martyr is alive. Bal ahya, rather they are alive. This is not a metaphor. This is not some sort of consolation offered to the grieving to help them get through the night. It is actually a correction. God is correcting us. He says, وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ, do not think, do not reckon, do not suppose. The verb here is about perception. He is telling us that when we look at the martyrdom of our beloved ones and we see death, we're seeing it all wrong. The shaheed or the martyr has not ended. Rather, the shaheed has arrived. And the second thing, and this is where I want us to pause, is what comes next in the verse, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and receiving, yani the shaheed is receiving glad tidings about those who have not yet joined them from behind. They are receiving glad tidings. About whom? About us. About those who have not yet joined them. About those who are still behind, still here, still in this world of trial and test. Do you see what this means? It means that the shaheed, the martyr, is not merely alive. Rather, the shaheed is watching. They are looking back at us. They are receiving news about us. And the verse tells us that they are either rejoicing at what they see, or they are waiting. Waiting to see what we do with their blood. Waiting to see whether their testimony will be carried forward, or whether it will be buried under our grief and our silence and our return to the comfortable routines that their sacrifice was meant to shatter. This is what this evening is about. Not only to mourn, though we will mourn. Not only to remember, though of course we will remember, but to ask ourselves a question that the blood of our shuhada, our martyrs, has placed before us, and that this Arba'een, this 40th, now demands we answer. What will we do with their testimony? Please give me a loud salawat. We move on to the bridge that connects the previous session titled The Unbroken Chain to this session, which is The Unbroken Testimony.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Now, some of you were with us not so long ago for a session we called The Unbroken Chain. We gathered in the immediate aftermath of the martyrdom of our leader, Imam Sayyed Ali, al-Husayni, al-Khamenei, may God rest his pure soul. The wound was fresh. The shock had not yet settled. And the question that hung over us that night was an urgent one. What happens now? What happens to the chain of wilaya when its most visible link is struck? And the answer we arrived at, together with the help of God and the guidance of Ahlulbayt, was that the chain does not break. It has never broken, because it was never held together by any one man, however great that man was. It is held together by God's promise, by the covenant that began with the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and it passed through the Imams, peace and blessings be upon them all, and continues unbroken through the institution of Wilayat al-Faqih until, or the governance of the jurist, until the return of the Imam of our time. May our souls be his ransom, and may God hasten his return. That was the unbroken chain, the institution, the structure, the divine architecture that outlives every individual who serves it. Tonight we shift our gaze. Tonight we do not ask what survives after the martyr is taken. Tonight we ask what the martyr, the shaheed, left behind. Not an institution, but a testimony, a witness written in blood, a message that does not merely echo, it amplifies. It grows louder with each passing day, with each passing generation. Every empire that tries to silence it and fails, it gets louder. If the unbroken chain was about the institution that endures, then the unbroken testimony is about the message that endures and about the duty, the sacred obligation that it places upon every single one of us who witnessed it. We are now 40 days on from the martyrdom of our beloved leader. 40 days since the girls of Minab were taken from their schoolhouses by the bombs of an empire that calls itself civilized. 40 days. And the number itself, as we shall see, is not incidental. It is not arbitrary. It is in fact a threshold. And tonight, by the grace of God, we will cross it together. We will speak about three things. First, the significance of 40, al-Arba'een, in our theology, in our history, and in the broader traditions of the prophets. Why 40? What does this number do to those who endure it? Second, the meaning of shaheed, a word we use constantly but whose depths we rarely pause to excavate. Why is the martyr called a witness? What did they see? What did they witness? And what does their death make visible to us? And third, our duty. Not the shaheed or the martyr's duty, that has been fulfilled, but ours. What does it mean to be the ones who witnessed the witness? What is asked of us now, not as mourners, but as carriers of a testimony that must not die with our tears? And we will close, God willing, with a remembrance of our beloved shuhada, from the earliest to the most recent, and a supplication that asks God to count us among those who were worthy of their sacrifice. In the name of the Lord of the martyrs and the truthful, let us begin. Please give me a loud salawat and we move on to point 1, the significance of 40.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وجل فرجه.
So tonight is not an ordinary gathering. It is an Arba'een. And before we speak about the shaheed, before we speak about our duty, I want us to understand what that word means, what the number 40 does in the vocabulary of God. Because 40 is not arbitrary. It is not a cultural convention. It is not something our scholars have invented. It is a number that appears again and again in the Quran, in the Sunnah, in the traditions of every prophet. And every single time it appears, it marks the same thing, a threshold, a boundary between what was and what must be now, a crucible in which something is either transformed or exposed. Let me show you what I mean. God says in Surah Al-A'raf, the chapter of the heights, 7th chapter of the Quran, verse 142. And we appointed for Moses 30 nights and completed them with 10. So the term of his Lord was completed as 40 nights. 40 nights on the mountain, not 30, not 50, 40. And notice, God did not give him the tablets on the first night. He did not reveal the divine speech on the 10th night or even the 20th. The tablets came at the end of the 40. The entire period was preparation, refinement, purification. Moses, peace and blessings be upon him, a prophet already chosen, already spoken to at the burning bush, already entrusted with the mission to Pharaoh. Even he needed 40 nights of preparation before he was ready to receive the fullness of divine guidance. The 40 was not waiting, the 40 was becoming. And here is what we often miss about this story. While Moses was on the mountain being transformed, his people down below were being exposed. They could not endure the 40. They could not hold their faith for 40 nights without their prophet in front of them. And so they turned to the calf. The same 40 that refined Moses revealed the weakness of those who could not endure it. Hold on to that thought. We will return to it. Our prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, his family and righteous companions, received his first revelation and was formally appointed as the messenger of God at the age of 40. This is universally agreed upon across both the Shi'i and Sunni traditions. There is no dispute on this point at all. Al-Yaqubi records in it. Al-Yaqubi records in his Tarikh, in his book of history, his compendium on history. Allama Majlisi dedicates extensive narrations to it in volume 18 of Bihar al-Anwar. Ayatollah Ja'far Subhani, in his masterful biography of the Prophet titled The Message, discusses it in careful detail in the chapter on the first revelation. And our tradition is highly specific about when this happened. The Be'that, the formal appointment, the beginning of the prophetic mission, took place on the 27th of the month of Rajab in the cave of Hira. The Sunni traditions often place the first revelation in the month of Ramadan, and our scholars have explained this distinction with great precision. The mission itself, the appointment, began on the 27th of Rajab with the first verse of Surah Al-Alaq, the chapter of the clot, the 96th chapter of the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, "Read in the name of your Lord who created." While the complete holistic reality of the Quran descended upon the Prophet's heart later, during Laylat al-Qadr, the night of destiny in the month of Ramadan, before being revealed piecemeal over the next 23 years. But the point for us tonight is this: it happened at 40, not before and not after. 40 years he lived amongst the people of Mecca, 40 years of watching, 40 years of witnessing their idolatry, their injustice, their burying of their daughters, their worship of stone. He would retreat to the cave of Hira year after year in solitude, in contemplation, in a turning toward God that deepened with every passing season. And all the while, the vessel was being shaped. The forge was doing its work. And when the vessel was ready, when the 40 years of preparation had reached their completion, then Gabriel came. Then came Iqra, or read. Then came the revelation that would reshape the entire world. And here I'd like to share with you something quite extraordinary. A first-hand account of that moment from none other than Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, peace and blessings be upon him.
اللهم صل على
اللهم صل على
محمد
محمد وعلى محمد.
وعجل.
In Sermon 192 of Nahj Balagha, known as the Sermon of Qasi'ah, Imam Ali describes being present. He says, every year he used to go into seclusion in the Mount of Hira, where I saw him, but no one else saw him. Pause on that. Imam Ali was there, not as a passive bystander, as the one companion who was granted access to these retreats. And then he describes the moment of revelation. Imam Ali says, I heard the moan of Satan when the revelation descended upon him. I said, O Messenger of God, what is this moan? And the messenger replied, this is Satan, who has lost all hope of being worshipped. O Ali, you see all that I see and you hear all that I hear, except that you are not a prophet. The references for all of these are in the write-up. There are two things to note over here. First, and this is a point our scholars emphasize with great care, the Prophet was not frightened. He was not confused. He did not doubt his sanity, nor did he question what was happening to him. Our tradition firmly rejects any suggestion of this. The Prophet had been prepared by 40 years of divine refinement for exactly this moment. He received the revelation with absolute certainty, with complete readiness. The 40 had done its work. And second, the moan of Satan. When the 40 is completed, when the transformation reaches its fulfillment, the forces of falsehood know. They feel it. They lose hope. That moan is the sign of an entire age of darkness realizing that its time is ending. Prophethood did not come to a youth in haste. It came to a man who had been forged, quietly, patiently over 4 decades, into someone capable of carrying the weight of the final message. The 40 was the forge, and what emerged from that forge shook the throne of every tyrant from Mecca to the empires beyond till today. And then there is this, a tradition from the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, his family and righteous companions, that goes to the very heart of what the number 40 means for the human soul. The hadith reads, whoever dedicates himself sincerely to God for 40 days, the springs of wisdom will appear from his heart upon his tongue. And the references, like all of these sessions, is in the write-up. I encourage everyone to go to reflections313.com and to review the write-up. Now, you will find sometimes this narration is narrated with a slight variation. Instead of Arba'een yawman, or 40 days, it will say Arba'een sabahan, meaning 40 mornings. But the core, the meaning is identical. And now a word about this hadith for those of you who are students of the tradition, because I think it's important to be precise about what we're citing and on which authority. In our tradition, this hadith is recorded by Ibn Fahd al-Hilli in the well-known book Uddat al-Da'i, one of the great classical works on supplication and spiritual discipline. From there, Allama Majlisi transmits it in Bihar al-Anwar in volume 67. And Mullah Muhsin Fayyad Kashani also records it in Al-Wafi. In the Sunni tradition, it appears in Al-Isfahani's Hilyat al-Awliya and is cited prominently by Imam Ghazali in Ihya Ulum al-Din. Now, I want to be transparent because scholarship demands transparency. From the strict perspective of hadith chain analysis, what we call ilm al-rijal, the chains of transmission for this specific wording carry technical weaknesses. If you want to understand what the technical weaknesses are, please refer to the write-up. So the chain is discussed. This is the honest assessment. But, and this is crucial, you will be hard-pressed to find a single Shi'i scholar of akhlaq, ethics, or irfan, mysticism or gnosis, who dismisses this hadith. And the reason is this, the mat, what we call the meaning or the content or the substance of what is being said, is universally accepted. In fact, it's not merely accepted, it is tested. The great masters of our spiritual tradition, Mullah Sadra, Allama Tabatabai, Imam Khamenei, may God rest their pure souls, they did not merely quote this hadith, they lived it. They practiced the Arba'eeniyya, the 40-day spiritual retreat of utter sincerity. And they found the Prophet Muhammad's promise to be a literal reality. The springs of wisdom appeared. The heart was unlocked. The tongue was opened. This is what our scholars call spiritual empiricism. The truth of the hadith is not only in its chain, but in its result. Generation after generation of wayfarers on the path to God have tested this 40-day threshold and found it to be exactly as the Prophet described. And this is entirely consistent with the Quran itself. God tells us in Surah Ankabut, the 29th chapter of the Quran, the chapter of the spider, in verse number 69. He says, "And those who strive for us, we will surely guide them to our paths." The principle is the same. Sincerity of effort over a sustained period produces divine guidance. The hadith of 40 days gives this principle a very specific frame, a measurable commitment, a defined threshold. 40 days of ikhlas or sincerity, 40 days of genuine turning, and what emerges on the other side is not what went in. And notice, when Imam Khamenei, may God rest his pure soul, taught this hadith to his students, he was building the spiritual foundations of a revolution. The same revolution whose torch was carried for decades by our beloved Imam Khamenei, may God rest his pure soul. There is a line, quiet but unbroken, between the mystic's 40-day retreat and the shaheed or the martyr's 40-day Arba'een. Both of these are crucibles. Both demand sincerity. Both promise transformation. So this is the key to understanding what an Arba'een truly is. It is not merely a mourning period. It is not simply the custom of waiting 40 days before holding a memorial. It is a spiritual threshold, divinely appointed, in which transformation is not just possible, but promised to the one who endures it with sincerity. The scholars have tested it, the mystics have walked it, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, his family and righteous companions, guaranteed it. If you have spent these 40 days, since the martyrdom of our leader, since the killing of the young girls of Minab, if you have spent them in sincere grief, sincere reflection, sincere turning towards God, then something should have changed in you by now. The springs should be flowing. Wisdom should be appearing where before there was only anguish. And if nothing has changed, then the 40 is asking you, why? And it's not only in our tradition. The number 40 echoes across the entire history of divine guidance, because the God who appointed it is one, and his methods are consistent. Noah, or Nuh, peace and blessings be upon him, and the flood. The rain fell for 40 days and 40 nights. After 40, the old world was gone, annihilated, washed clean. A new world stood in its place. The 40 was not merely the duration of a storm. It was the time span required for a complete renewal, for the corruption to be washed away entirely, and for something new to emerge from the water. The biblical tradition preserves this number in the book of Genesis. The Quran speaks of the flood itself, and the message is the same. The 40 is the instrument of total transformation. Jesus, or Prophet Isa, peace and blessings be upon him, and may God hasten his return, the son of Saint Mary, Sayyedah Maryam, peace and blessings be upon her, spent 40 days in the wilderness in fasting and solitude before he began his public mission.
Okay.
The gospel accounts in Matthew and Luke both record this. 40 days of preparation, not retreat from the world, but preparation to re-enter it as something different from what he was before. The wilderness did not weaken him, it sharpened him. It burnt away everything that was not essential, and what remained was ready for the mission. And Bani Isra'il, the children of Israel, wandered for 40 years in the desert. God tells us in Surah Al-Ma'idah, the chapter of the table spread, 5th chapter of the Quran, verse number 26. He said, "Then it is forbidden to them for 40 years. They shall wander in the earth." 40 years. The entire generation, an entire generation had to pass. The generation that was too afraid to enter the Holy Land, too compromised by its own weakness, before a new generation forged in the desert was ready to inherit the promise. Do you see the pattern? Across every tradition, every prophet, every dispensation, 40 marks the boundary between before and after. It is the threshold between the person you were and the person you are being asked to become. between the community that grieved and the community that rises, between the tears and the testimony. The question that every Arba'een places before those who observe it is this: which side of the boundary are you on? Have you crossed it? Or are you still standing at the threshold, mourning but unchanged, weeping but unwilling to move? And nowhere is this clearer, nowhere is the transformative power of 40 more visible than in the Arba'een of Imam Husayn, peace and blessings be upon him. The 40th day after Ashura, the day when two things happened that changed the meaning of Karbala forever. The first, Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, the companion of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, arrived at the grave of Imam al-Husayn. He was old, he was blind, he had crossed the desert to reach a grave in a land of desolation, and he became the first Za'ir, the first pilgrim, to visit the resting place of the Master of Martyrs. His journey is recorded in Kamil al-Ziyarat, one of our earliest and most authoritative sources. Think about what that means. A blind old man crossing the desert to stand at a grave. Why? Because the 40 had done its work on him. The 40 had transformed his grief into obligation. He could not merely mourn from afar. He had to go. He had to be present. He had to bear witness with his body, even if his eyes could no longer see. This is what the 40 does. It will not let you sit still. And the second, the Ahlulbayt, the surviving family of Imam Husayn, returned to Karbala from their captivity in Sham. Led by Sayyid Zaynab and Imam Sajjad, peace and blessings be upon them both, they came back to the place of slaughter. And this is of course recorded by Sayyid ibn Tawus in his well-known book Luhuf. Though some historians, they discuss the precise dating, the tradition is powerful and deeply rooted. And notice what happens at the Arba'een. The mourning does not end, rather it transforms. The tears do not stop, but they take on a new purpose. The survivors do not retreat into private grief. They begin the work of testifying. Said Zaynab, who we will speak about more later tonight, God willing, does not weep in silence. She speaks. She testifies. She takes the blood of her brother and makes it speak to the world. The Arba'een of Imam Husayn is the moment when tragedy becomes movement, when grief becomes revolution, when the mourner becomes a witness. And that is the model for every Arba'een that has followed since, including this one. So here we are. 40 days have passed. 40 days since the martyrdom of Imam Sayyed Ali, al-Husayni, al-Khamenei. May God elevate his station and accept his sacrifice. 40 days since the innocent girls of Minab, young, bright, full of life and hope and future, who were taken from their schoolhouse by the bombs of an empire that has lost every claim to any moral authority it ever pretended to hold. 40 days. The same span that refined Moses upon the mountain, the same span that prepared Jesus in the wilderness, the same span that separated the generation of fear from the generation of promise. The same span that turned the morning of Karbala into the movement that still shakes the throne of oppressors 14 centuries later. And the question the 40 now puts to us is the same question it has always put to those who stand at its threshold. What has this done to you? Have these 40 days changed you? Have they sharpened something in you? Have the springs of wisdom begun to flow? Or have you merely endured them, counted the days, attended the gatherings, posted your tributes, and returned to the same life you were living before their blood was spilt? Because the 40 does not merely invite transformation. As we saw with the people of Moses, with those who could not endure 40 nights without turning to the calf, the 40 also exposes. It exposes who was sincere and who was not sincere, who was truly shaken and who was only briefly moved, who will cross the threshold and who will remain standing at it, mourning without motion and grieving without growth. The 40 days have not been given to us for passive grief. They are a crucible, a divine instrument of transformation. And the question this Arba'een puts to every one of us tonight is this: have you let the blood of the shaheed change you, or have you merely counted the days? And here is my challenge to you, not as something abstract, but as something concrete, something you take with you when you leave this gathering tonight. Commit to the next 40 days. Not 40 days of mourning, that time has passed and it has done its work. 40 days of transformation. Pick one thing, a practice, a commitment, a study, a change in habit, and dedicate the next 40 days to it. In the name of our shuhada, in honor of their blood. Perhaps it is a study, committing to read and understand one book of substance, one work that deepens your knowledge of your faith, your history, and your responsibility. Perhaps it's a practice, a prayer you've been neglecting, a discipline you have let slip, a relationship with God that has grown distant. Perhaps it is a stand, a commitment to speak where you have been silent, to stop looking away from the injustice that the shuhada gave their lives to expose. Whatever it is, make it specific, make it real, and dedicate it to them. Because the Arba'een is not an ending. It is not the last day of mourning. It is the first day of whatever comes next. And what comes next is up to you. Please give me a loud salawat. We move to point 2, the shaheed as witness.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
So we've spoken about the 40, what it means, what it demands, and what it transforms. Now I want to turn to the one whose blood marks the beginning of this 40, the shaheed. We use this word constantly. Every time a believer falls in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Iran, anywhere, we say shaheed. We say it with love. We say it with grief. We say it with honor. But I want us to pause tonight and ask, do we truly know what we are saying? Because the word shaheed does not mean what most people think it means. And understanding what it actually means will change everything about how we understand what happened 40 days ago and what is being asked of us now. So let's look at the word itself. The Arabic root is Shin Ha Dal. And from this single root come 3 meanings that are so intertwined they cannot be separated. The great lexicographers, for example, Ibn Mansur in Lisan al-Arab and others, they lay these meanings out with a precision that takes your breath away. The first meaning, shaheedat, to witness, to be present, to see something with your own eyes, to observe it directly. The second, shaheedah, to testify, to bear witness, to stand up and declare what you have seen. And the third meaning, and this is where the depth lies, shaheed, the form which is known as fa'il, or the doing in Arabic, carries both an active and a passive sense simultaneously. The shaheed is the one who witnesses, who saw the truth so clearly, so completely, that they could not do anything but stand for it. And the shaheed is the one who is witnessed by God, seen by Him, known by Him, received by Him. So when we call someone a shaheed, we are not saying this person died. We are not even saying this person died bravely or this person died for a cause. We are actually saying something far more profound. We are saying this person saw. They saw the truth about God, about justice, about the nature of this world and the next. And what they saw was so overwhelming, so undeniable, that their entire being became a testimony to it. Their life became a testimony. And when their life was taken, their death became a testimony louder, clearer, more permanent than anything they could have said while breathing. The shaheed is not named for how they died. The shaheed is named for what they saw and for what their death now makes visible to the rest of us. And I want you to notice something. The English word martyr comes from the Greek martis, and it also means witness. The same concept across languages, across civilizations. But in common Western usage, the word has lost its force. A martyr in the modern Western imagination is someone who suffered, someone who was victimized. There is a passivity to it, a sense that the martyr is defined by what was done to them. In the Quranic usage, the opposite is true. The shaheed is defined not by what was done to them, but by what they did. They testified. They bore witness. Their death was not an ending. It was the opening statement in a trial that is still ongoing, a trial in which the oppressor stands accused, and the shaheed's blood is the evidence. And this chain of testimony begins at the very beginning. God tells us in Surah Al-Ma'idah, the chapter of the table spread, 5th chapter of the Quran, verses 27 to number 28. He says, "Recite to them the tale of the two sons of Adam in truth. When each offered a sacrifice, it was accepted from one and not from the other. He said, 'I will surely kill you.' He replied, 'God only accepts from the God conscious. If you stretch your hand towards me to kill me, I shall not stretch my hand towards you to kill you. Indeed, I fear God, the Lord of the worlds.'" Habil, Abel, the son of Adam, the first human being to die. And look at how he died. His brother said, "I will kill you." And Habil's response, or Abel's response, was not to fight, not to flee, not to beg. His response was to testify. "I fear God, the Lord of the worlds. If you stretch your hand to kill me, I will not stretch mine to kill you." This is the first shahada in human history. And notice what he says. There are things more precious than survival. There is a truth that is worth more than my life. I would rather die holding that truth than live having abandoned it. Abel did not raise his hand, not because he was weak, but because raising his hand would have meant becoming Cain, becoming his brother. And he chose death over that. He chose to testify with his refusal, with his body, with his blood, that the way of God is not the way of violence. That submission to God means refusing to become the oppressor, even when the oppressor is standing over you. Every shaheed since has repeated this testimony in 1,000 forms across 1,000 generations, in every land and every language, the same witness. From Abel to Imam Husayn, from Imam Husayn to the shuhada of our own time. The form changes, but the testimony does not. And in our Muharram sessions this year, God willing, we will walk this entire chain together. From the very first shaheed, the son of Adam, who would not raise his hand, to the latest. From Abel to the schoolgirls of Minab, who never even had the chance to raise their hands. We will trace this line of blood testimony that runs through the whole of human history and ask, what is it saying? What has it always been saying? And what does it demand of those who hear it? That is for Muharram, God willing. But tonight, I want to plant the seed, because what we're discussing now is the root from which that entire series will, God willing, grow. Now let us return to our anchoring verse, but this time I want to bring in a companion verse from Surah Al-Baqarah, the chapter of the cow, second chapter of the Quran, verse 154, that will sharpen the point even further. In Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, "And do not say of those who are killed in the way of God, they are dead. Rather, they are alive, but you perceive it not." I want you to notice the verb. La taqulu. Do not say. This is a command. This is a correction. God is not offering comfort to the grieving. He is correcting an error in how we see reality. He is saying, When you look at the shaheed and you see death, you are wrong. You are perceiving something incorrectly. وَلَكِنْ لَا تَشْعُرُونَ. But you do not perceive. The problem is not with the shaheed, the problem is with us, with our eyes, with our categories. We see a body and we think, khalas, finished. We see blood and we think, loss. We see a grave and we think, absence. And God says, no, you are not seeing what's actually there. The shaheed is alive. Bal ahya, rather they are alive. And not alive in some diminished metaphorical sense. The verse in Surah Al-Imran tells us they are receiving provision. Yurzaqoon. They are rejoicing. Farihin. They are receiving glad tidings. Yastabshirun. This is not the language of metaphor. This is the language of a reality more real than the one that we are in. And here is the point I want you to carry with you. A living person can be pressured. A living person can be threatened. A living person can be bought, broken, or silenced, or compromised. A shaheed cannot. A shaheed's testimony is sealed. It is final. It is incorruptible. No intelligence service can interrogate it. No sanctions can weaken it. No propaganda can distort it. No assassination can end it, because the assassination is the testimony. That is why empires are terrified of martyrs. Not because of what they did in life, but because of what they become in death. The shaheed is the one witness the empire cannot cross-examine, cannot discredit, cannot disappear. The blood speaks, and it does not stop speaking. And now I want to bring this to our present moment, because we are not here tonight to discuss martyrdom in the abstract. We are here because specific human beings, people we knew, people we loved, people we followed, have entered this station, and their blood is speaking to us right now. I want to place two testimonies before you tonight. They look different on the surface. The world would categorize them differently. But I want to show you that they're saying exactly the same thing. The first testimony, Imam Sayyed Ali, al-Husayni, al-Khamenei. A lifetime of scholarship, a lifetime of service, decades of carrying the weight of the wilaya upon his shoulders. Through an 8-year war that should have broken Iran, through sanctions designed to strangle a nation, through internal dissent and external pressure from every direction, through assassinations of his brothers and his generals, through betrayals and conspiracies that would have crushed anyone of lesser resolve. And through all of it, steadfast. Through all of it, upright. Through all of it, testifying. Testifying that the project of Islamic governance is real, that it is possible, that it is worth defending with everything you have. Testifying that resistance to empire is not a tactic to be abandoned when the cost gets too high. It is a covenant. Testifying that the wilaya will not bend, it will not kneel, it will not negotiate away the blood of its martyrs for the comfort of a truce with the oppressor. And then, after decades of this testimony, at the apex of his life's work, he was taken, shaheed. His blood joins the river that flows from Karbala to Minab, to wherever the next testimony will be written. And his shahada says, this path is true. I walked it for a lifetime. I die upon it without regret. Follow it. The second testimony is the girls of Minab. Young, at the very beginning of their lives, not on a battlefield in a schoolhouse, not carrying weapons, carrying books, not making political statements, learning, growing, looking forward to a future that was supposed to belong to them. And then the bombs came. The machinery of empire, the same empire that calls itself civilized, that lectures the world about human rights, that wraps its violence in the language of precision and necessity, dropped its ordinance on a school. And those girls were taken, not because of anything they did, not because of any choice they made, but because they existed. in the wrong place, at the wrong time, in the wrong country, under the wrong flag, in the eyes of an empire that has decided that Iranian lives are expendable. They did not choose the battlefield was brought to them. They did not volunteer for Shahada. Shahada was imposed upon them, and yet, and this is the profound and devastating truth, their testimony is no less powerful for being unchosen. In some ways, it is more powerful, because the innocence of the martyrs of Minab strips the empire of every excuse, every justification, every carefully constructed narrative about strategic targets and acceptable losses. Their Shahada says, look at what this empire really is. Look at what it does when it thinks no one is watching. Look at the blood on its hands, the blood of children, and tell me again that it stands for justice. Now, the world looks at these two testimonies and sees different categories: an aged leader and the young students, the political and the civilian, the deliberate and the collateral. But Shahada makes them one. The root is the same, the witness is the same. Both of them testified, one with a lifetime of words and deeds, and the other with a silence that screams louder than any speech, that this empire's violence is illegitimate and that standing in its path is itself an act of truth and resistance. And here is the proof that the Quran is not speaking in metaphor when it says bal ahya. Look at what's happened in these 40 days. Look at what the pure blood of these young martyrs of Minab has done to the corrupt empire that spilt it. It has become a catalyst. It is shaking the foundations that decades of diplomacy and negotiation could not shake. The testimony of those girls, their innocence, their youth, the sheer obscenity of what was done to them, has pierced through every firewall of propaganda and reached the conscience of the world. The empire meant to terrorize. Instead, it testified against itself. It handed the prosecution its most devastating exhibit. The blood of the shaheed is a truth serum, and the empire was forced to swallow it. They are alive, and their testimony is working. And so we come back, as we always do, to Imam al-Husayni, because every shahada in history is a footnote to Karbala, and every Arba'een is a reflection of the first. From Ziyarat Arba'een, attributed to Imam Sadiq, peace and blessings be upon him, we recite these words: I bear witness that you established the prayer, gave the zakat, enjoined the good, forbade the evil, and obeyed God and His Messenger until certainty came to you. I want you to hear the verb. Ashhadu annaka qad aqamta as-salat. Ashhadu. I bear witness. Not I remember you. Not I honor you. Not I mourn you. No. Ashhadu. I bear witness. When we recite the ziyarah, and we will recite a ziyarah together, Ali Yasin, at the end of this program tonight, God willing, we are not performing an act of nostalgia. We are not simply paying our respects to someone who died a long time ago. We are entering the chain of witness. We are adding our voices to the testimony. The shaheed testified with their blood. We testify with our words, ashhadu, with our presence. We are here tonight, 40 days on, and we have not forgotten. With our commitment, we say, you established the prayer, you enjoined the good, you forbade the evil, and we see it, we affirm it, and we carry it forward. The grammar of ziyarah does not allow passivity. The word ashhadu makes us, or I testify, makes us participants. It makes us witnesses. It pulls us out of the audience and into the courtroom. And once you're in the courtroom, once you have said, ashhadu, I testify, you cannot pretend you did not see that which you saw. Which brings us to the question, and this is where our session turns for the final time, God willing. The shaheed's testimony is not complete until someone receives it. A witness who speaks to an empty courtroom has testified, yes, but justice requires a jury. The testimony requires someone to hear it, to weigh it, to act upon it. Tonight, you are the jury. The blood of Imam Khamenei, the blood of the girls of Minab, the blood of Haj Qasim, the blood of Haj Ahmad, the blood of Sayyid Hassan, the blood of Sayyid Hashim, the blood of every shaheed in this unbroken chain that stretches from Abel to this very night. It has been presented as evidence. It has been placed before you. You have heard it. You have seen it. You have wept over it. The question is not whether you have heard the testimony. You did. You are here. You heard it. The question is, what is your verdict and what will you do with it? Because a jury that hears the evidence and then goes home and does nothing, that is not a jury. That is a spectator. And the blood of the shaheed was not spilt for spectators. Learn their names. Learn their stories. When the empire's media erases them, when it calls its bombs precision strikes and its victims collateral damage and its wars operations, your duty, your minimum duty, the floor beneath which you cannot fall, is to say their names and tell the truth of what happened. This is the most basic act of witness. And even this small thing, the empire fears. Because the empire's power depends upon your silence. And the shaheed's testimony depends upon your voice. Please give me a loud salawat. We move to the third and last point, the duty of the witness.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum.
So now we come to it. The question that this entire evening has been building toward. We've spoken about the 40, the crucible that transforms or exposes. We've spoken about the shaheed, the one who sees the truth and testifies to it with their blood. And now we must speak about ourselves. Because there is a word we have not addressed tonight. We have spoken about shaheed, the one who testifies. But the Arabic root gives us another word equally important and equally binding, shahid. The shaheed is the one who testifies with their life. The shahid is the one who witnesses the testimony, the one who was there, the one who saw, the one who heard. That is us. We witnessed the martyrdom of our leader. We witnessed the massacre of the young girls of Minab. We saw the images, we heard the news, we felt the pain and the blow. And by witnessing it, whether we choose to or not, we entered the chain. We became shahid, witnesses. And when that word, and with that word, comes a duty that we cannot escape. Not by grief, not by silence, not by pretending we did not see what we saw. The shaheed has spoken. Their testimony is sealed. It's complete. It's incorruptible. The question now is, what do we, the witnesses, do with it? And the paradigm is said Zaynab, the first transmitter. To understand our duty, we must go back to the one who defined it. The one who stood at the very first crossroads between grief and testimony and chose, against every pressure, every threat, every instinct of self-preservation, to speak. Said Zaynab, peace and blessings be upon her, after Karbala, everything invited silence. Imam al-Husayni and his companions had given everything. The men were slain, the tents were burnt. The family of the Prophet, the women, the children, Imam Sayyed, who was barely alive with fever, were chained and dragged from Karbala to Kufa and from Kufa to Sham. Every circumstance said, submit, be quiet, accept what has happened, grieve in private, do not provoke the tyrant further. Said Zaynab refused all of it. In the court of Ibn Ziyad in Kufa, she spoke. In the streets, as the people watched the captives pass, she spoke. And in the palace of Yazid himself, in the capital of the empire that had just murdered her brother, she stood, a woman in chains, in the seat of power of the most powerful man in the world at that time, and she said, Do you think, O Yazid, that by closing in on us from every direction of the earth and horizon of the sky, and by driving us like captives, that we are humiliated before God and that you are honored before Him? And these words should burn themselves into our hearts. She said, by God, you shall never erase our memory, nor shall you extinguish our revelation. And the references, like with all of these, are in the write-up. You will never erase our memory, you will never kill our message. 14 centuries have passed, and what is the verdict? Has Yazid erased their memory? Has any Yazid in any age, in any form, managed to extinguish the revelation of Prophet Muhammad that Imam Husayn died to protect? The answer stands in every majlis, in every Arba'een procession, in every tear shed for Karbala from Najaf to London, from Jakarta to Sao Paulo. The answer is walking through the streets of Iraq every year, 20 million strong. The answer is sitting on this call tonight. Said Zaynab was right. And she was right because she did not merely believe the testimony would survive, she ensured it. She became the vehicle, she became the transmitter. She took the blood of Imam al-Husayn and translated it into a voice that the empire could not silence. A voice that echoes still. A voice that will echo until the return of the Imam of our time. May our souls be his ransom and may God hasten his return. This is what it means to be a witness. Not to just watch, not to just mourn, but to transmit. To take the testimony of the shaheed and carry it through your voice, through your actions, through your life into the world. And this is our model. This is the standard we are measured against. Not, did you cry for the shaheed? But, did you speak for them? Did you carry their testimony forward? Did you ensure that their blood was not spilt in vain? Every generation needs, it said Zaynab, someone who receives the testimony and refuses to let it die in private grief. Someone who speaks when the empire demands silence. Someone who stands in the court of the oppressor, whatever form that court takes in their time, and says, you will never erase our memory. The question is whether this generation, our generation, will produce its Zaynabs, or whether we will be the ones who wept and then we went home. So now let me give you a framework, because duty to be real must be specific. It must have steps.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
It must be something that you can measure against yourself and yourself against. I want to present 3 levels of obligation, 3 tiers of what it means to be a witness. Each one builds on the one before. Each one is necessary, and each one demands more than the one that came before it. So the first, this is remembrance or dhikr. The most basic obligation of the witness, do not let them be forgotten. Imam Sayyid, peace and blessings be upon him, has said, keep our cause alive. May God have mercy on the one who keeps our cause alive. The references are, as always, in the write-up. Keep our cause alive. This is not some passive nostalgia. This is not putting up a poster once a year and feeling that you've done your part. The verb that is used over here is ihya, to give life, to vivify, to make alive. It is an active, ongoing, relentless commitment to ensuring that the memory of the shaheed remains alive in the hearts and minds of the community and the world. And this is what we're doing tonight. This gathering, this Arba'een, is an act of dhikr. The Noha, or the lamentation hymn that our brother will share with us tonight, the tribute that our other sister has prepared, the documentary that another sister has made, the poems and words that members of this community will offer after this sermon, all of this is dhikr. All of this is ihya. All of this is keeping the cause alive. And it matters. It matters enormously. Because the empire's first strategy is always erasure. Changing the truth, changing reality. We see it around us. Before it lies about the shaheed, it tries to make you forget them entirely. It floods the news cycle. It buries yesterday's atrocity under today's distraction. It makes the 24-hour news cycle turn so fast that the blood of last month's martyrs is dry before anyone has had time to ask what happened. Dhikr is the refusal to let that happen. It is the act of forcing to stop the wheel, of saying no. We will not move on. We will not forget. We will say their names. This is the flaw. It is necessary. It is noble, but it is the flaw, not the ceiling. The second duty is shahada, or testimony. The intermediate obligation, carry their witness into the world. God says in Surah Al-Baqarah, the chapter of the cow, second chapter of the Quran, verse 283, He says, and do not conceal testimony. Whoever conceals it, his heart is indeed sinful. Listen to the weight and gravity of this verse. Do not conceal, do not suppress, do not bury. The verb and that is used, katama, means to hide, to keep secret, to swallow down. And the consequence? His heart is sinful. Not his tongue, not his hand, his heart. The concealment of testimony corrupts the witness from the inside out. Now, this verse is typically discussed in the context of legal testimony, of bearing witness in a court. But its principle is universal. And tonight I want us to feel its universality. Because we have witnessed something. We have seen what happened to our leader. We have seen what happened to the young girls of Minab. We have seen what this empire does in the dark while it lectures the world about the light. And the verse says, if you have seen this and you conceal it, if you remain silent when the truth requires your voice, then your heart is sinning. Silence in the face of what we have witnessed is not neutrality. It is not wisdom. It is not pragmatism. The Quran calls it what it is, a sin of the heart. Shahada, or testimony, means carrying the shaheed's witness beyond the walls of the majlis or the sermon or the mosque or the center and into the world. It means speaking the truth about what happened in your conversations, in your communities, on your platforms, in your workplaces, in every space where the empire's narrative goes unchallenged. When the empire calls its bombs precision strikes, you say, they hit a school. When the empire calls its victims collateral damage, you say their names. When the empire calls its wars operations and its invasions interventions, you testify to what you saw, because you are a shahid. You witnessed it, and the Quran has told you, do not conceal that which you witnessed. And I want to share something with you here because it is relevant and it is real. Some of you may know that as part of our Truth Promoters Network, we maintain a website, themartyr.net, whose sole purpose is exactly this, testimony, bearing witness, saying their names. This website was first established many years ago after the martyrdom of Hajj Ahmad Maghniya, may God rest his pure soul. It was an attempt to do what said Zaynab did, to take the testimony of the shaheed and the shuhada and carry it forward, to chronicle their lives, to tell their stories, to ensure that the empire's erasure machine would not succeed. For various reasons, lack of support, lack of energy, difficulties that come with swimming against the current, it went dormant for a period. But the domain remained. The seed was in the soil waiting. And now, thanks to God, it continues. And I mention this not to promote a website, but because it illustrates something important about Shahada. The work of testimony is not glamorous. It is not always met with support. There are times when you will speak and no one will listen. There are times when the audience is empty and the response is silence. There are times when you will be mocked or ignored or worse. But the duty remains. Do not conceal the testimony. The verse does not say, bear witness only when it's convenient, only when you have an audience, only when the empire is okay with it and not watching. No, the verse says, Do not conceal it, period. The shaheed did not ask whether the timing was right before they testified. The shaheed did not check the analytics. The shaheed did not wait for critical mass of support. They saw the truth and they spoke with their blood. And we are being asked to speak with a far lower cost. Just our voices, just our presence, just our refusal to be silent. And the third duty is amal, action or living testimony. The highest obligation, shape your life around the values the shaheed died for. This is attributed to Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, peace and blessings be upon him, and in some transmissions to Imam al-Baqir, and it's narrated in Al-Kafi on the chapter on truthfulness. And the references, of course, are in the write-up. The Imam says, "Be callers to the people without your tongues. Let them see from you striving, truthfulness and piety." Without your tongues. Not through speeches, not through sermons, not through posts and shares and hashtags, through your life. Through what people see when they see you. Through the striving, what we call al-ijtihad. Through truthfulness, as-sidq. Through piety, al-wara'. This is the highest form of testimony. And it is the one that most of us find the hardest because it does not allow for performance. It does not allow for the gap between what we say and what we do. It demands that our daily lives, our actual mundane, ordinary lives, become the evidence. And this is where the Arba'een transformation from the first point comes full circle. Remember when we said the 40 is a crucible? It does not merely invite change, it demands it. You entered this 40 as a mourner. The question is, what did you emerge as? If Imam Khamenei, may God rest his pure soul, spent his life building a society grounded in Islamic governance, justice and resistance to empire, what are you building? And I don't mean building a state. I mean in your home, in your family, in your workplace, in your communities. What are you building? Is it aligned with the values that he died defending? Or have you compartmentalized him, honoring his memory on Saturday nights and living by a different set of values for the rest of the week? If the girls of Minab went to school because they believed in a future, what future are you working toward? Are you educating your children with the same hope, the same commitment to knowledge, the same belief that learning matters even when the bombs are falling? Or have you surrendered your children's minds to the empire's entertainment complex or machine and called it pragmatism? These are not rhetorical questions. These are the questions that amal, or living testimony, demands we answer. Not with words, with choices, with the actual observable shape of our lives. So what does it mean to be a witness today? Let me make this concrete, because I don't want anyone to leave tonight thinking this is all abstract, thinking this is some sort of beautiful theology that applies to someone else, somewhere else, in some other time. No, this is about you, it's about me, here and now, tomorrow morning. In the age of information warfare, being a shaheed means refusing the emperor's framing. It means catching yourself when you use their language, when you say conflict instead of aggression, when you say tensions instead of occupation, when you say both sides when there is a bomber and a school, when you use terms like regime when it should be government. It means correcting the record, not once in some dramatic move, but consistently, patiently in every conversation where the truth is being bent and twisted. In the age of distraction, being a shaheed means refusing to let the news cycle bury them. The empire's strategy is not always to lie. Sometimes it is simply to move on, to flood the feed with the next outrage, the next scandal, the next spectacle, until yesterday's atrocity feels like ancient history and last month's martyrs are forgotten. Your duty, our duty, is to resist that current, to be the one who says, no, we are still talking about this. We are still talking about Minab. We are still talking about Gaza. We are still talking about Lebanon. We have not moved on. We will not move on. In the age of helplessness, and this is perhaps the most important, being a shahid means refusing despair. Because despair is the empire's most powerful weapon. Far more powerful than its bombs. Far more powerful than its propaganda. If it can make you believe that nothing will change, that resistance is futile, that the machine is too big and too strong, then it has silenced you more effectively than any censorship ever could. But the Shaheed's testimony is inherently hopeful. Think about it. The Shaheed testified because they believed that the truth matters. They gave their life because they believed, with a certainty that survived the approach of death itself, that the truth will prevail. To despair is to contradict their witness. To give up is to say, meh, you died for nothing. And we know by the Quran, by the evidence of history, by the testimony of every Shaheed, from Habil to tonight, that they did not die for nothing. So do not despair. The empire looks strong. It always looks strong. Yazid looks strong. Pharaoh looks strong. Nimrud looks strong. Every oppressor in history looked strong, right up to the moment that they didn't. And what brought them down was never a bigger army. It was a testimony that would not die. It was a people who refused to be silent. It was a Said Zaynab who stood in the court and said, "You will never erase our memory." And if you want proof that the testimony is working, you do not need to open a history book. You need to only open your eyes. Look what has unfolded in our own lifetime. The people of Gaza, besieged, starved, bombed, caged for decades, chose to no longer be forgotten. They became their own shahideen. They made their own amal. They stood with almost nothing against one of the most heavily armed regimes on the face of this earth and said, "We will not go quietly into the night. We refuse to be erased." And they did not stand alone. Their brethren in Lebanon rose. They gave sacrifices so monumental that history will spend generations reckoning with what Hezbollah offered on the altar of Palestine. Their brethren in Yemen, a people themselves ravaged by years of war, by the schemes of puppet regimes doing the bidding of empire and its allies. Yemen, battered and bleeding, stood up and blockaded the sea lanes of the oppressor with almost nothing against the mightiest navy in the world. And they have not blinked. And Iran. Iran that has borne 47 years of crippling sanctions. 47 years simply for refusing to let the Palestinian cause go quietly into the night. Iran that has buried its generals, its scientists, its leaders, its children, one after another, assassination after assassination, and has not broken. Iran that is being bombed by an empire that fires its own generals for warning against war crimes, whose leader speaks to the world in a language so vulgar, so unhinged, so devoid of any pretense of civilization, that even those who once called themselves his allies are turning away in disgust. And when the empire struck the highest branch, when it took from us the Wali al-Faqih himself, what happened? Did the institution collapse? Did the project of Islamic governance crumble without its leader, as the empire's very, very clever strategist no doubt prayed it would? No. Within 1 week, the Assembly of Experts had appointed Imam Sayyed Khamenei, the new leader, the new Wali al-Faqih, may God protect him. And he has risen to that trust. He is working, he is struggling, he is teaching, he is standing firm on the path of his father and the path of his forefathers, the Ahlulbayt, peace and blessings be upon them all. The chain did not break. We said this in the Unbroken Chain, and the evidence stands before us. The wilaya continues, the testimony continues, the resistance continues. The empire took the man, And the institution answered within days. That is not weakness. That is a civilization that has built something the empire cannot comprehend. Because the empire builds on individuals and interests, and the wilaya is built on covenant and divine promise. Listen to how the empire speaks now. Not with the measured confidence of the powerful, but with the desperate flailing obscenity of a bully who can feel the ground shifting beneath him. This is not the language of strength. That is the language of an order that is falling apart. When a man must threaten war crimes openly, when he must scream his threats into the void because his whispered commands no longer produce obedience, that man is not in control. He is in freefall. And it is not only the Muslims who see it. When the leader of over 1 billion Catholics, the Pope himself, looks at the empire's ambassador and says, God does not hear the prayers of those who wage war, whose hands are stained with blood, something has shifted in the world. The testimony of the shaheedat has reached ears that the empire thought were permanently closed. Consciences that were meant to stay asleep are waking up. The witness is spreading beyond the ummah, beyond the borders the empire built to contain it. And all the while, and we must never let this slip from our sight, not for a single day, for a single moment, the children of Gaza still starve. The mothers and fathers and elders of Gaza still endure a genocide that the world watches in real time on its screens and struggles to stop. The machinery of death has not stopped. The testimony is not yet complete. The trial is still in session, but the verdict is coming. It is coming because the shaheed's blood does not dry. It does not fade. It does not become yesterday's news. It accumulates. It testifies. And the courtroom of history has never, not once, returned a final verdict in favor of the oppressor. So do not despair. Do not look at the bombs and the sanctions and the vulgarity of the powerful and conclude nothing can be done. Everything that is happening, from Gaza to Yemen to Lebanon to Iran to the crumbling alliances of the empire, all of it began with a people who refused to be silent. All of it began with testimony. All of it began with someone somewhere saying, do not conceal what you have witnessed. And I want to say one more thing before we close this point. And this is not from a book or a hadith. This is about us, about this gathering, about how we came to be sitting here tonight. This group, the Truth Promoters, did not begin with a strategic plan. It did not begin with funding or institutional support or a grand vision, and it still has none, nor does it request any. It began the way most true things begin, with grief, and with the refusal to let grief be the final word. After the martyrdom of Haj Qasim Soleimani, may God rest his pure soul, a small group of believers found each other. We were scattered. We were hurting. Some of us had known Haj Qasim personally as a teacher, a mentor, someone who moved us towards God with a gentleness that belied the ferocity of his commitment in the battlefield. And we simply needed to be together, to console each other, to make sense of what has happened. So we started talking on Saturday calls, on Zoom, on Jitsi, on Telegram, whatever platform would hold us. And the attendance, brothers and sisters, I will be honest with you, there were sessions when it was two people, just two believers on opposite sides of the same house, on their separate devices, refusing to let the conversation die. This is what we started with, not a movement, not a program, two people and an internet connection and a refusal to be silent. And then, slowly, painfully, with setbacks and long stretches of almost nothing, others joined. The genocide in Gaza awakened something. The martyrdom of our dear Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, may God rest his pure soul, in September of 2024, was a blow that could have broken us, but instead it sharpened us. We began recording, we began teaching, we began building the sessions, the websites, the resources, the networks. The martyr.net, as I said, was revived. This program, our Wednesday Majalis, our Saturday Majalis, was born. Why am I telling you this? I'm not telling you for credit, not for history. I'm telling you because it is the proof of what I've been saying all night. The testimony of the shaheed works. It transforms. It transmits. It takes two grieving believers on their laptops and over time, with patience, and that was the first series we discussed, with the help of God, it builds something. Not because they were special, not because they had resources or connections or support, but because they received the testimony and refused to conceal it. Do not conceal that which you have witnessed. And look at where we are tonight, an Arba'een gathering, a community. One of the items in the program is from a sister who has never formally entered Islam, preparing a tribute with love. A brother whose hymn, I promise you, will shake the room. A young woman who produced a documentary with great skill and devotion. And all of you, every one of you, who chose to be here on a late on a Saturday evening, 40 days on, to say, we have not forgotten, we will not forget. This is what happens when you receive the testimony and act upon it. Not grand things, but real things. Small things that grow. Seeds that become trees. And if you're hearing an echo of our brother Abdullah's noha or hymn, you're hearing correctly, and you will know what I mean when you hear it. So the lesson, the final lesson for this final point. The most dangerous thing an empire can face is not a martyr. Empires have always killed. They are experts at killing. They have built entire economies around killing. Another body does not frighten them. What frightens them, what keeps their strategists awake, what the intelligence agencies write their reports about, is the people who receive the martyr's testimony and refuse to be silent. That is what said Zaynab built in the court of Yazid. That is what the Arba'een produces every year, in every generation, in every corner of the Ummah. That is what a handful of believers on a Saturday call can become, by the grace of God, if they refuse to let the testimony die. And that is what we are all being called to become tonight. Not mourners, but witnesses. Not just an audience, but transmitters. Not spectators at a trial, but the jury, the advocates, the ones who carry the evidence out of the courtroom and into the world. The shaheed has spoken, their testimony is complete, it is sealed, it is alive with God, and it is working in this world. You can see it, working right now in the crumbling of the empire's legitimacy and legacy, in the awakening of consciences all around the globe. Now it's your turn. Before you leave this gathering tonight, before you step out of this room and back into the world that the shaheed's blood is trying to change, decide, what will your testimony be? Not in grand gestures, not in dramatic sacrifices, no. In daily life, in what you read, what you share, what you teach your children, how you spend your money, in where you direct your energy, in the words you choose when someone asks you what happened, in the refusal to look away when looking away would be easier. The shahada of the shaheed was dramatic because it had to be. Yours can be quiet, but it must be real. Pick one thing, one concrete thing, and begin tomorrow, in their name, in honor of their blood, as your testimony, your shahada, that you received their witness and you will not let it die. Please give me a loud salawat, and we move to the last portion, which is a supplication eulogy in two parts.
اللهم صل
اللهم
على
صل على
محمد
محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه.
So we've spoken tonight about the 40 and what it demands of us. We have spoken about the shaheed and what their blood is saying to the world. We have spoken about our duty as witnesses, as transmitters, as the ones who must carry the testimony forward. Now I ask all of you to set all of that aside for a while. Not to forget it. You will carry it with you, God willing, when you leave tonight. But to set it aside. Because what I want to do now is not teach. It is not to argue. It is not to challenge. What I want to do now is to remember, simply remember, to say their names, to let their names fill this room, and then together to turn to the one who received them and ask him to make us worthy of what they gave. We remember tonight the shuhada of this ummah, those whose blood is the ink in which the testimony of truth is written. We remember tonight those whose names we know and those whose names only God knows. The named and the unnamed, the leaders and the unknown, the generals and the schoolgirls, every one of them alive with their Lord, receiving provision and rejoicing. We remember Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi, may God protect his pure soul, the one who built the resistance in Lebanon from nothing, from the rubble of occupation, from the ashes of invasion, from the determination of a people who had been told they were too weak to fight. He built it with his hands and his faith and his scholarship. And when the empire came for him, it did not come for him alone. It murdered his wife and it murdered his child. It murdered an entire family and called it a military operation. But what he built did not die with him. What he built stood for decades after him. What he built shook the earth. We remember Hajj Ahmad Maghniya, may God bless his pure soul, the shadow that empires could not outrun, the architect of resistance whose brilliance was matched only by his devotion to God and to the cause of the oppressed. He moved through the world like a whisper, unseen, unheard, but felt in every blow the resistance struck against the illegal genocidal occupier. They hunted him for decades. They feared him like they feared no one else. And when they finally reached him in Damascus, his martyrdom did not end the fear. It deepened the resolve of every brother and sister who walked in his path. We remember Haj Qasim Sulaymani, may God bless his pure soul, the general who wept, the commander who knelt at the grave of Imam al-Husayn and sobbed like a child, the strategist who crossed every border the empire tried to build, every wall, every sanction, every line in the sand, and carried the cause of Palestine on his shoulders from Tehran to Baghdad, from Beirut to Damascus and beyond. They struck him down with a coward's weapon on the road from Baghdad airport, a drone, fired from a continent away by men who would not dare face him in the light. And his blood watered the tree of resistance across an entire region. Some of us in this room knew him, knew his gentleness, knew the way he would speak to you, not as a general to a subordinate, but as a father, as a brother, as someone whose only concern was to move you closer to God and further from your own ego and nafs. That gentleness, that impossible combination of ferocity on the battlefield and tenderness in person, that was Haj Qasim. And the world has not seen his like since. And perhaps will not again until the coming of the one we await. We remember Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, may God rest his pure soul, the voice of the oppressed that rang out from Dahir and was heard in every village in the south, in every refugee camp, in every heart that had been told that resistance was impossible. He looked at the empire in the eye for decades and he never blinked, not once. Not when they bombed Beirut in 2006, not when they killed his own son, not when the entire weight of the Zionist machine was pointed at his chest. He spoke and the Ummah listened. He promised and he delivered. He laughed. Oh my God, that laugh. And the oppressor trembled. They buried 82 bunker busters into the earth to reach him. 82. Because one was not enough. Because 10 were not enough. Because even in death, they were terrified of him, and they are terrified of him. And they were right to be afraid, because his words have not stopped. His voice has not gone silent. It echoes tonight in this room and in every room where believers gather and refuse surrender. We remember the Shuhada of Gaza. May God bless each and every one of them. The tens of thousands. The children pulled from rubble with dust still in their hair. The mothers who shielded the babies with their bodies and were buried alongside them. The fathers who searched through the wreckage with bare hands, calling names that no one answered. The doctors who operated by torchlight until the torchlight itself was bombed. The journalists who filmed their own genocide so the world would not say it did not know, and who were killed for filming it. We cannot name them all tonight. No single gathering could hold all of their names. But God knows every single one, every name, every face, every last breath. And they are alive with him, and they are rejoicing, and they are waiting. They are waiting for us. We remember the young girls, the martyrs of Minab. May God bless each and every one of them. These young girls, these schoolgirls, young, bright, full of life and promise and future. They went to school that morning the way every child goes to school. Think about your own children, with their bags and their books and their packed lunches, their friendship and their small, precious hopes for the day ahead. And the empire's bombs found them there. They did not choose the battlefield. They did not choose shahada. Shahada was brought to their classroom door and forced its way in. And in their innocence, in the sheer unbearable purity of what they were and what was done to them, they have become the most devastating testimony against the empire that this generation has seen. Their blood is not merely crying out for justice, it is producing justice. It is shaking foundations, it is ending alliances. It is stripping masks from faces that have worn them for decades. May God envelope them in His mercy. May He reunite them with their families in the highest garden. May He make their innocence a weight on the scales against every hand that was complicit in their murder, from the pilot who fired the missile or the bomb, to the president who gave the order, or to the criminal who manipulated the president. We remember Imam Sayyed Ali al-Husayni al-Khamenei, may God bless his pure soul, al-Wali al-Faqih, al-Mujahid al-Shaheed, the one who held the trust of the Imam of our time for decades and never once set it down. Not in the 8 years of sacred defense when the world armed his enemy and starved his people. Not in the decades of sanctions designed to bring a nation to its knees. Not when they took his generals one by one, Haj Imad, Haj Qasim, Sayyid Hassan, etc. Each lost a wound that would have broken a lesser man. Not when the conspirators plotted from within and the enemies pressed from without. Not when the weight of an entire ummah's expectations rested on his shoulders and the resources to meet them were stripped away by the unjust world. Through all of it, steadfast. Through all of it, upright. Through all of it, his hand extended to the oppressed, his face turned towards the Imam of his age, his heart anchored in the covenant of wilayah. He warned us, he guided us, he taught us, he wept with us, he prayed for us, he carried what we could not carry, he saw what we could not see, and he did all of this for decades, knowing that the path he walked would end where it ended, knowing that the Shaheed's road has only one destination, and walking it anyway, without hesitation, without regret. 40 days ago, he arrived. Rather, they are alive with their Lord, receiving provision. He is alive, he is with his Lord, he is rejoicing, and he is receiving glad tidings about us, about what we will do next, about whether we will be worthy of the trust he has left behind. And we feel his absence tonight like a wound that has not yet learned to scar, like a space in the room that nothing can fill, like a silence where his voice used to be. But the silence is not empty. It is full of his testimony. It is asking us a question. And the question is the same question this entire evening has been asking. What will you do now? And now we turn to dua. O our Lord, you have told us that the shuhada are alive with you, that they are receiving provision, that they are rejoicing. We believe this. We hold to this. We cling to this with everything that we have, because without this belief, the weight of what has been taken from us would be unbearable. But our Lord, we are who are left behind. We are who are still in the world of trial and test and temptation, and we need your help. We are weak where they were strong. We are uncertain where they were sure. We are hesitant where they were decisive. We need you, O our Lord. You took from us a leader, a father, a guide, Imam Sayyed Ali al-Khamenei, and in his place you left us a testimony written in his blood, sealed by his sacrifice, carried now by his son, may God protect him, and by every believer who received it. Help us to carry it. Help us to be worthy of it. Do not let us be among those who heard the truth and then forgot. Do not let us be among those who wept at the Arba'een and then returned to heedlessness, who mourned on Saturday and forgot by Monday, who shed tears for the shaheed and then lived as though the shaheed died for nothing. O our Lord, you have shown us, through the blood of the innocent, through the schoolgirls of Minab, through the children of Gaza, pulled from the rubble with their mothers' arms still around them, you have shown us what this empire truly is, what it does in the dark, what it does in the light, what it does to children. Give us the clarity to see it for what it is. Give us the courage to say what we see. And give us the strength, O Lord, give us the strength to resist it. Not tomorrow, not when the conditions are right, but now, today, with whatever we have. O our Lord, bless and protect Imam Sayyid al-Khamenei, the successor of his father and the bearer of his trust. Strengthen his hand, sharpen his sight, surround him with those who are sincere, protect him from those who would betray, and make him, as his father was, a lantern on the path of the Ahlulbayt, a shield for the oppressed, and a thorn in the side of every oppressor. O our Lord, count us among the shaheedat, not necessarily those who die for the truth, but those who live for it. Make our lives a testimony. Make our choices a witness. Make our silence impossible when injustice speaks. Make us among those who received the testimony of the shaheed and did not conceal it, who carried it forward, who transmitted it, who refused to be silent even when silence was safer, even when silence was easier, even when silence was all the world demanded of us. O our Lord, we ask you, by the blood of Husayn ibn Ali, shed in the plains of Karbala and not yet dry. We ask you, by the tears of Sayyid Zaynab, shed in the courts of the oppressor and not yet wiped. We ask you, by the patience of Imam Sajjad, who bore the unbearable and did not break. We ask you, by the steadfastness of every shaheed, from Abel the son of Adam to the last soul who fell in your path this very day. We ask you, hasten the return of the one whose coming will complete every testimony, the one whose appearance will answer every cry, the one who will fill the earth with justice as it has been filled with oppression, the one we wait for, the one we weep for, the one we live for, the master of the age, may our souls be his ransom. Hasten, O Lord, his noble relief. Hasten his coming and make us, all of us in this room tonight, among his helpers, his supporters, his soldiers and his witnesses. Amen, O Lord, sustainer of the universes. Amen, O most merciful of the merciful. وآخر الدعوان أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.